Before man ever lifted his eyes to the stars, there were those who watched from above, divine sentinels known as watchers, appointed to guard the boundary between heaven and earth. Among them was one whose gaze pierced the veil of eternity, Sariel, the watcher of the heaven. He was born of light, yet his heart was drawn to the shadows of mankind. Out of compassion he descended, not to conquer, but to guide. But in his mercy, he broke the order of creation, and the heavens trembled. This is the story of the angel who loved too deeply, who fell not from pride, but from sorrow, and who was condemned to watch forever, in silence, as the story of humanity unfolds beneath the eyes of heaven. Before the first dawn broke upon the void, before the rhythm of time began its eternal heartbeat, there existed only silence, a silence so vast and sacred that even eternity bowed before it. This silence was not emptiness, but fullness, a deep and holy stillness where all things yet unborn rested within the mind of the eternal. It was the cradle of existence, the moment before the first word of creation was spoken. In that stillness, the Eternal One, beyond form, beyond name, conceived the universe. Within his infinite thought swirled the essence of everything that would ever be: light and shadow, matter and spirit, law and chaos, love and consequence. Creation slept within him like a dream waiting to awaken. And then he spoke. It was not speech as mortals know it. It was command and compassion in one breath. His word was not sound, it was being. From that word poured the brilliance of existence. Light burst forth like the breath of the divine, tearing through the silence and scattering the darkness that had never known its opposite. From that first light came the architecture of the cosmos, the great firmament, the wheeling galaxies, the laws that govern motion, and the threads of time that wove themselves into a living tapestry. The Eternal's voice did not fade into echo, it became the pulse of reality, the unseen rhythm that holds all creation in harmony. From the radiance of his will emerged beings of pure essence, angels, creatures woven of flame, sound, and thought. They were reflections of his perfection, each carrying a fragment of his light and purpose. Some were mighty and terrible, forged for war and judgment. Others were gentle and radiant, destined to sing in the courts of heaven or guide the souls of men. Yet from among all these celestial beings, a new order was formed, one unlike the rest. They were not warriors, nor heralds, nor singers. They were watchers, sentinels who would gaze upon the unfolding of time, bearing witness to creation's every breath. They were tasked not with intervention but with understanding, not with command but with observation. They would see what even the angels might forget, the quiet miracle of existence itself. Thus were born the Watchers of Heaven, beings whose eyes never closed, whose hearts burned with divine awareness, whose purpose was to stand between realms and ensure that the harmony of heaven and earth remained unbroken. They stood upon the pillars of light that bridged the worlds, beholding the newborn universe. They watched stars awaken like sparks in a great forge. They saw the first oceans rise and the first wind move upon the face of the deep. And in their hearts, all blossomed, a reverence for the beauty of the Eternal's design. Among them was one whose light outshone the others, a being of immense wisdom and serene authority. His name was Sariel, meaning command of God. His presence was neither thunderous nor terrible, but still and radiant, as if he embodied the calm mind of heaven itself. To Sariel, the Eternal gave a sacred charge, to oversee the balance between the divine and the mortal, to guard the threshold where spirit becomes flesh, where heaven breathes life into dust. He was made the eye of the heavens, the first and highest of the watchers, endowed with vision that could pierce through the fabric of creation itself. Sariel's gaze reached beyond the stars. He could see the dance of galaxies as easily as the trembling of a single leaf in a forgotten forest. He understood the pattern of all things, the rise and fall of worlds, the rhythm of life and decay, the endless cycle of beginning and end. Yet even with such power, his heart was filled not with pride, but with wonder. He loved the symmetry of creation, the perfect balance of light and shadow. To him, the Eternal's design was a symphony, each star a note, each life a tone in the grand melody of existence. He saw that every act, every heartbeat, every moment of joy and sorrow was a thread woven into the great tapestry of God's will. And for this, he worshipped not only with his voice but with his very being. But the Eternal, in his wisdom, did not create beauty without purpose. To Sariel he said, "You shall watch the flow of life and the course of time. You shall guard the harmony that binds the worlds. For even light must be measured, and even freedom must have form. You will be my eyes upon creation, and through you shall order endure." Thus Sariel took his place among the stars, a sentinel of heaven. He watched the dawns of new worlds, the birth of light, the rise of mountains, and the stirring of oceans. He saw the shaping of creatures that walked, flew, and swam, each made with intent, each carrying the spark of divine thought. And when, in time, humanity came forth from the dust, fragile yet crowned with the breath of God, Sariel looked upon them with awe. For in their eyes he saw something no angel possessed, the reflection of free will, the mystery of choice, and the potential to love beyond command. This was the beginning of the Watcher's fascination, the first flicker of the longing that would one day draw him down from the stars. But in this first age, before compassion became temptation and duty became sorrow, Sariel was pure. He was the watcher of the boundary, the keeper of the rhythm, the eye that beheld both heaven and earth, and saw that it was good. When the Eternal finished the great labor of creation, he spread his hand, and the universe sang. The heavens shimmered with new stars, each one a spark from the voice of God. The seas churned with their first breath, tasting the shorelines of newborn lands. Mountains rose like living pillars, their roots buried deep in the memory of eternity, their peaks reaching upward in silent praise. Rivers carved their paths as if tracing the veins of the world, and the wind, carrying the scent of divine breath, moved upon the face of the earth. From his station beyond the veil, Sariel beheld it all. His eyes, fashioned to perceive the pulse of creation, drank in the unfolding beauty of the new world. The earth was still young, untouched by sin, unmarked by sorrow. Everything moved in harmony, like a single hymn sung by many voices. The sun's warmth was gentle, not fierce. The night sky was a blanket of living diamonds. The world breathed in rhythm with the will of its maker, and the watcher's heart swelled with reverence. He had witnessed the birth of stars, the forging of galaxies, and the unending symphony of heaven. Yet nothing he had ever seen stirred him as deeply as this. The earth, fragile yet radiant, a jewel suspended in the dark ocean of space. It was here, he realized, that the Eternal's mystery would unfold most vividly. For in this small, spinning sphere lay the story of love, freedom, and redemption yet to come. Then, at the appointed time, Sariel saw something new, something unlike any being before it. Out of the dust, shaped by the hands of the Eternal, man arose. And into his nostrils, God breathed his own breath, the very spirit that had once moved across the waters. Sariel watched as humanity took its first trembling steps beneath the golden light of Eden. They were small, fragile, and fleeting, bound to earth, yet bearing the flame of heaven within. He saw them look upon the stars with wonder, touch the soil with reverence, and speak with voices that echoed faintly of their Creator's tone. No angel had ever been made in such a way, so weak, yet so divine. Humanity was a paradox, flesh bound to mortality, yet animated by eternity. And Sariel, whose purpose was to observe, found himself moved. He watched the first laughter rise from human lips, and felt a joy he could not name. He saw tears fall for the first time, and felt an ache that was not his own. He saw love and loss, and the fragile courage of those who dared to hope beyond understanding. Among the angels, emotions existed as reflections of divine will, calm, pure, detached. But what Sariel felt was different. It was not the echo of heaven's perfection. It was something living, trembling, and real. And from that moment, something ancient within him began to stir, a spark of compassion that would one day burn into longing. From his radiant post above the world, Sariel whispered into the endless sky, "How wondrous are these beings, made from dust yet bearing the image of eternity. But why must they suffer so? Why must their joy be shadowed by fear? Why give them reason if they must wander in confusion? Why breathe life into them only to let that life fade like mist at dawn?" His voice, though heavy with awe and sorrow, carried no rebellion, only the ache of love. Yet heaven remained silent. The other watchers, steadfast in their duty, did not speak. They continued their eternal vigil, eyes fixed upon the balance of creation. But Sariel's heart began to tremble with questions that had no answers. For silence, he realized, is the first test of obedience. The Eternal did not answer his wondering cry, not because he was absent, but because he desired faith beyond sight. The wisdom of heaven is not given to those who demand it, but to those who wait. Yet waiting is hardest for those who love deeply. And Sariel's love for mankind was growing into something dangerous, something that stretched beyond the limits of angelic purpose. Sariel's gaze lingered upon the world. He saw men and women toil and weep, hunger and strive, love and lose. He saw them raise their hands in prayer toward a heaven they could not see, and he felt the weight of their yearning. He longed to descend, to touch their sorrow, to guide their steps, to ease their burdens. Compassion, once a virtue, began to transform within him. It was no longer the distant empathy of a celestial being. It became longing, a yearning to act, to mend, to share in the mortal struggle. But angels were not made to intervene. They were created to watch, to record, and to protect the order of creation without altering its course. Sariel's heart, however, could no longer remain still. What he saw on earth was not chaos, but beauty struggling through pain, light pushing through darkness. To him, it was not rebellion to love, it was worship, to see the divine reflected in the broken and the weak. And yet, as all heavenly beings learn, even light can become shadow when it steps beyond its boundary. Within Sariel, love began to whisper against law. He did not desire power, nor pride, nor rebellion. His defiance was gentle, clothed in sorrow. It was not the flame of Lucifer's arrogance, but the trembling heart of one who loved too much. He did not yet know that such love could lead to ruin. The longer he watched, the deeper his ache grew. Each prayer that rose from human lips felt like a call to him. Each tear shed in the dust felt like a plea that heaven refused to hear. And though the eternal silence was wisdom, Sariel's compassion could no longer bear it. Thus was planted the seed of dissent, the thought that perhaps love, even if forbidden, could heal what obedience could not. And from that single thought, the heavens would one day tremble. Ages passed like sighs across eternity, and still Sariel's gaze lingered upon the earth. What began as admiration had become sorrow. What began as curiosity had become compassion. He watched men labor beneath the sun, seeking meaning in a world they could not fully grasp. He heard their prayers rise toward a silent heaven, and though he was not their God, he longed to answer them. In the high places of heaven, the watchers remained steadfast, silent sentinels of divine decree. Yet Sariel's heart burned with a different light. His love for mankind was not rebellion, not yet, but it carried within it a seed that could not stay dormant. For love without obedience, even when born from mercy, becomes the first whisper of disobedience. And so, in a moment known only to eternity, Sariel crossed the veil. He descended through the firmament, not in thunder or defiance, but in sorrow and radiance. His wings blazed with light as he fell, not like lightning cast down, but like dawn breaking over the dark. When his feet touched the soil of earth, creation itself seemed to tremble, for never before had a being of his purity walked the mortal plane unbidden. Sariel concealed his divine fire in a cloak of light, so that mankind would not perish from his glory. To them, he appeared as a luminous figure, neither Holy Spirit nor flesh, yet familiar in form. The people beheld him and fell upon their faces, believing heaven itself had come down to dwell among them. He did not demand worship, nor seek to be exalted. He came to teach, for his heart could not bear the ignorance of those who groped through darkness, yearning for the knowledge of the heavens. And so Sariel shared what had been forbidden to reveal. He taught men to read the stars, to measure the turning of the heavens and discern the seasons. He showed them how the winds carried the voices of change, how the moon commanded the tides, how the roots of the earth could heal wounds or cause them. He unveiled the hidden patterns of creation, the subtle weavings that held balance between life and death. It was knowledge meant for the divine, but Sariel believed he was doing good. He believed that in illuminating humanity, he was fulfilling heaven's truest intent, that creation should know its creator more deeply. For a time, his heart was at peace. The people adored him. They built altars not of worship, but of gratitude, offering him fruits of the field and songs beneath the stars. To them, he was a messenger of light, a bridge between their fragile existence and the unfathomable heavens. And Sariel, seeing their joy, thought his mission blessed. But wisdom, when given to hearts unprepared, becomes perilous. What had been taught for healing, men used for dominion. What had been meant to reveal the Creator, they used to imitate creation. They took the secrets of metal and forged weapons. They learned the movement of the stars and tried to command fate itself. The knowledge of healing became the knowledge of poison, and the sacred became profane. Sariel's heart broke as he saw what his compassion had unleashed. He had sought to raise mankind toward heaven, yet now they reached upward not in worship, but in pride. The very light he had offered began to blind them. Still, he told himself it was not too late. Still, he believed redemption could be found in further guidance. But heaven, silent and sorrowful, watched the boundary between divine and mortal begin to dissolve. Sariel's descent did not go unnoticed. There were others among the watchers, beings who had also gazed too long upon the world, whose hearts had also trembled with pity or desire. Seeing Sariel among men, they too abandoned their posts. Some came in compassion, seeking to help him in his misguided mercy. Others came out of curiosity, and still others out of lust for the beauty of mortal flesh. They descended in secret, cloaked in radiant forms that men could not comprehend. But their arrival did not bring enlightenment, it brought temptation. The daughters of men, seeing these beings of glory, were drawn to them. The sons of heaven, tasting the warmth of flesh and the sweetness of earthly love, forgot their immortal vows. They took wives among mortals and sired children unlike any born of man. These offspring were mighty, their strength beyond measure, their hunger unending. They were called Nephilim, the giants of old, born of heaven's fire and earth's clay. But though their bodies bore power, their souls bore imbalance. They were beings of divided essence, unable to find harmony between their divine and mortal natures. They devoured the earth's abundance, their hands red with conquest. They enslaved men, built kingdoms of cruelty, and drowned the songs of creation in blood. The world that had once been radiant with promise became a field of corruption, its harmony shattered. The balance of creation began to waver. The sacred order that bound heaven and earth trembled under the weight of disobedience. Even the stars, once steady in their courses, seemed to dim in sorrow. The rivers bled with the cries of the oppressed, and the soil drank the tears of heaven's grief. The other angels beheld what had been done and wept. The Eternal, who had woven the laws of light and life, now beheld his creation stained by the very beings meant to protect it. The sons of heaven had unbalanced what they were sworn to guard. Sariel, once the eye of the heavens, stood among the ruins of his good intentions. His light, once pure and steady, flickered with anguish. He looked upon the earth he had sought to uplift and saw it poisoned by pride, greed, and violence. He had wanted to heal, but his mercy had opened the door to corruption. He realized then that love, untempered by obedience, can be more dangerous than hatred. For hatred destroys openly, but misguided love corrupts quietly, until even light serves the shadow. In the silence that followed, Sariel lifted his face to the heavens and whispered the same question that had begun it all. Why must they suffer so? But now the question carried another meaning, one heavy with guilt and remorse. For it was no longer man alone who suffered, it was creation itself. The skies darkened. The boundaries between heaven and earth had been breached, and justice, long restrained, began to stir. The descent of the Watcher had begun not in rebellion, but in compassion. Yet compassion without restraint had become the very seed of the fall. And in heaven's distant halls the decree was being written, the decree that would call forth the storm, the flood, and the chains of judgment. The world groaned beneath the weight of corruption. The rivers that once reflected the light of heaven now carried blood. The songs of creation had become cries of despair. The Nephilim, offspring of divine fire and mortal clay, ruled as tyrants, their hunger insatiable. Men worshipped them as gods, forgetting the true Maker who had breathed life into their dust. The heavens, long silent, began to tremble. What the Watchers had done could no longer remain hidden. The harmony that had bound creation together was breaking apart like shattered glass. Every act of pride, every misuse of divine gift, sent ripples through the spiritual fabric of existence. Even the stars seemed to dim in mourning. The cry of the earth rose, an ancient, aching lament, and it reached the throne of the Almighty. Then the stillness of heaven was broken. The Eternal, whose silence had once been patience, now spoke in thunder. His voice was like 1,000 storms gathered into one, and all of creation bowed in reverence and fear. From his throne of unapproachable light, he summoned his archangels, Michael, the warrior of truth, Raphael, the healer of souls, and Uriel, the flame of divine wisdom. Before them, he revealed the corruption that had spread across the earth. The Eternal's gaze pierced every hidden thing, the arrogance of the Nephilim, the despair of mankind, and the sorrow of the fallen Watchers who had abandoned their posts. "My creation groans beneath the weight of sin," said the voice that spoke worlds into being. "The Watchers who were sworn to guard have become the tempters. Their wisdom has become poison, and their light has turned to shadow. The time of cleansing has come." At his word, the heavens darkened, not from absence of light, but from the gathering of divine power. The sky rolled like a great scroll being drawn shut. Lightning laced across the horizon, splitting the firmament as if the universe itself were being judged. Michael led the hosts of heaven, descending with a sound like the tearing of the sky. With every beat of their wings, thunder rolled and oceans heaved. The archangels moved as living fire, each carrying the will of the Almighty. Raphael went forth to heal the wounds of the earth, but before healing, there must be cleansing. The seas rose in fury, washing away the cities of pride. The mountains groaned and split open, releasing smoke and fire from their hearts. The winds became weapons of judgment, and rain fell not as blessing, but as reckoning. The Nephilim, whose voices once shook nations, cried out in terror as their strength failed them. Their fortresses crumbled, their empires drowned. Their names became whispers carried on the floodwaters of divine wrath. The watchers who had fallen looked on in horror, their brilliance extinguished, their glory reduced to trembling shame. They had sought to bless the world, but now they stood as its curse. And the justice of heaven, swift and unyielding, fell upon them. One by one, the watchers were seized by the host of heaven. Michael, radiant in righteousness, stood as their judge and deliverer of sentence. The very stars seemed to turn away as the fallen were bound with chains not of iron, but of shadow and silence, chains forged from the absence of God's presence, unbreakable and eternal. The ground split open beneath the mountains of the east, revealing caverns that no light could enter. Into these depths, the watchers were cast. There they would remain until the end of the age, neither dead nor alive, their brilliance dimmed to sorrowful embers. They became witnesses, not of glory, but of the justice they had forsaken. Their voices, once filled with songs of creation, now echoed only in lamentation. The memory of their compassion twisted into torment, for they could see the ruin of what their mercy had wrought, yet could do nothing to undo it. Yet among them, Sariel stood apart. His light, though faded, was not extinguished. He did not resist nor cry out. His gaze was fixed upon the desolation below, the shattered remnants of mankind, the ruined beauty of the earth, the silence where laughter once lived. When he was brought before the throne, he knelt without defense. He offered no plea, for his heart was already condemned by its own grief. But the Eternal, whose wisdom reaches beyond wrath, looked upon him not with anger but with sorrow. For Sariel's sin was unlike the others. His fall had not been born of arrogance or lust, but of love ungoverned by obedience. His compassion, though misguided, had sprung from a heart that truly cared for the fragile lives of men. And the Eternal, whose justice is perfect only when tempered by mercy, saw in Sariel's remorse the potential for redemption. Then the voice spoke, not in thunder, but in the still, deep tone that fills both heaven and the soul. Sariel, you who pitted what you were meant to protect, your transgression has wounded the order of creation, yet your sorrow is the seed of wisdom. You shall not be destroyed as the others. Instead, you shall bear a burden no mortal nor angel could endure. The heavens were silent as the decree was spoken. You shall watch the rise and fall of every nation, the birth and death of every age. You shall see the beauty and the horror of mankind, and remember what was lost. You shall be the watcher of the heaven, silent, eternal, unseen. Between light and shadow, you will stand. You will bear witness to all that unfolds beneath the stars, until the last dawn breaks and the final silence returns. And so it was done. Sariel was neither cast into darkness nor restored to light. He was set upon the threshold between them, a solitary sentinel bound not by chains, but by eternal duty. His wings no longer burned with the brilliance of the first dawn, yet they glowed faintly with the sorrow of understanding. He watched as the floodwaters receded, as life slowly returned to the earth. He saw generations rise from the ashes, carrying within them both the spark of divinity and the shadow of rebellion. He watched as kingdoms flourished and fell, as empires reached for the heavens only to crumble into dust. He became the silent historian of creation, the eye that sees, the heart that remembers. He could not intervene, could not speak, could not rest. His penance was eternity itself. The mortals below would never know his name, yet poets and prophets across the ages would feel his presence. In every whisper of wind, in every moment of awe beneath the night sky, there lingered the faint trace of his watchful gaze. In time, Sariel came to understand the wisdom of his sentence. What had once been punishment became purpose. For though he was exiled from the joy of heaven, he was not abandoned. Through him, the Eternal's mercy endured, a reminder that even divine justice is not vengeance, but the restoration of harmony. Sariel's endless vigil became the bridge between judgment and grace. He saw not only humanity's corruption, but its resilience. He watched as love endured through suffering, as faith rose from ruin, as light was born again from the ashes of sin. He remained the watcher of the heaven, not as one forgotten, but as one entrusted with remembrance, the angel who carries the memory of both paradise and fall, of what was lost and what might yet be redeemed. And so he waits, still and silent, for the day when heaven's voice shall speak again. When the chains will break, the skies will burn with final glory, and the Watcher's long vigil will at last come to its end. When the storm of divine judgment had passed, and the earth lay silent beneath the fading roar of heaven's fury, one being remained between both realms, Sariel, the Watcher of the heaven. He did not share the fate of his brethren who were bound in shadow, nor was he restored to the radiant choirs from which he had come. His punishment was his purpose, to stand forever between light and darkness, between mercy and judgment, between God and man. From that day forth, Sariel no longer walked among angels or men. He dwelled upon the threshold of eternity, in a realm that touched both time and timelessness. There, the winds of creation whispered the stories of ages past, and the light of 1,000 suns shimmered across the veil of the future. His wings, once bright as dawn, no longer blazed with the fire of their first glory. They glimmered instead with a muted radiance, the color of morning light, half gold and half gray. In that dim hue was written both heaven's majesty and earth's sorrow, for Sariel had seen both too deeply ever to belong wholly to one again. He had become the in-between, the guardian who could no longer command, the messenger who could no longer speak, the angel who loved creation too much to abandon it, and the servant who disobeyed too deeply to return. The world turned, and Sariel watched. He stood upon the unseen heights of the heavens and witnessed the ages unfold like waves upon an eternal sea. He saw the flood that cleansed the earth, the waters swallowing mountains as the sins of the first age were washed away. He saw the covenant of the rainbow, a bridge of mercy arched across the sky, a promise that wrath would never again come in that form. He beheld the birth of nations, tribes rising from the sons of Noah, spreading across the continents like the veins of a single living body. He watched kings ascend to power, some ruling with wisdom, others with cruelty, their empires shining for a time like morning suns before crumbling into dust. He saw prophets walking barefoot through deserts, crying out to the wind with voices filled with fire and pain, calling humanity back to its forgotten creator. He heard armies march beneath banners of false gods, spilling blood in the name of pride, ignorance, and fear. He watched cities rise, adorned in gold and arrogance, only to fall into ruin, swallowed by the same dust from which their builders had come. He saw the temple of Jerusalem rise in splendor, echo with prayers, and fall again in flame. He saw Rome, born of iron and ambition, stretch its hand over the earth, then collapse under its own weight. He saw kingdoms of faith become kingdoms of conquest, where truth was traded for power and mercy for dominion. Through it all, Sariel's gaze never wavered. Every act of mercy, every sin of pride, every prayer whispered from a trembling heart, all passed before his eternal sight. Though his voice was bound in silence, the world still felt his grief. His tears fell unseen upon the earth, yet they became the dew that softened the morning grass. His sighs moved as the wind before storms, the gentle breath before the thunder, the whisper before the cleansing rain. In the laughter of children, he heard echoes of the innocence he once saw in Eden. In the cries of the broken, he felt the same ache that first drew him down from the stars. He was everywhere and nowhere, the presence that stirred the hearts of poets, the silence that haunted the dreams of prophets, the weight of eternity pressing gently upon mortal souls. He did not despise mankind for their failings, rather he pitied them, for he saw in them the same yearning that had undone him, the same hunger to know, to love, to reach beyond the bounds of what was given. Each generation repeated his story in some form, a struggle between obedience and desire, faith and freedom, wisdom and pride. And though he was forbidden to intervene, his watching itself became a kind of prayer, a quiet intercession woven into the rhythm of creation. In his silence, he became a guardian of memory, keeping alive the knowledge of what once was pure. Among the angels, he was known as the Watcher of the heaven, but among mortals, those who sometimes sensed a strange, holy gaze upon their souls, he was remembered in whispers as the eye that remembers. Legends of him passed through ages. The shepherd who felt peace before a storm and said, "The heavens are watching." The prophet who saw visions of light and named it the Silent One above. The poet who wrote of a sorrowful angel who watches mankind with tears of dawn. They did not know his name, but they felt his presence, the unseen witness of every moment when heaven touched earth. To some, he was a guardian spirit, to others a silent judge, but in truth he was neither. He was remembrance itself, the living memory of creation's first harmony and its first fall. Through him, the cosmos never forgot its beginning, nor ceased yearning for its restoration. Centuries turned to millennia. The stars themselves shifted, their constellations rewriting the map of heaven. Yet Sariel remained, untouched by time, unwavering in his vigil. He watched prophets give way to apostles and kings to empires. He saw the birth of faiths, the wars of creeds, the dawn of hope, and the dusk of despair. He witnessed the crucifixion of the innocent one, the light made flesh, the living word. When the sky darkened and the earth quaked at that hour, Sariel bowed his head, for he knew that the silence of God was being broken anew. He saw mercy restored to a world that had long forgotten it. Still, his watch continued. For though redemption had entered time, the story was not yet complete. Humanity still wandered between darkness and dawn, still reaching, still falling, still rising again. And so the watcher endured, neither saint nor sinner, neither free nor bound, his eyes ever upon the tapestry of existence. It is said that at the end of all things, when the stars begin to tremble and the sky burns with the final light, Sariel will rise once more. Not as an accuser, nor as a judge, but as a herald, a voice that breaks the last silence, announcing the return of the light he once served in sorrow. On that day, the heavens will open not in wrath, but in remembrance. The voice that once commanded him will call again, and the burden of watching will be lifted. The chains of eternity will dissolve, and Sariel, the eye that remembers, will finally close his weary gaze. And the world will hear, perhaps for the first time since the beginning, the echo of his last words, words not of regret, but of peace. The silence is ended, the light returns. Then the stars will sing as they did in the first dawn, and creation will once again move in perfect harmony with its maker. The story of the Watcher will come full circle, not as tragedy, but as redemption. For when the silence of God is broken one last time, the Watcher shall speak again, and the heavens will listen.